Vice President of Postal Affairs and Industry Affairs, really kind of the broader aspect. I've been involved in the mailing industry for 30 years now and have seen a lot of changes and challenges throughout that time period, but just some really interesting technology. And folks, I am so thrilled to have today our very, very special guest, Hope Howard, the Manager of Data Operations and Postal Affairs. Hope, welcome to the webinar today.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so kind. I'm always a pleasure to work with you, Chris, and all the opportunities that are made available.
Thank you, Hope. You know, folks, I met Hope face to face, I should tell you, at Information Exchange, our annual user conference. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on after the presentation. But I have to tell you, when I got done speaking at Information Exchange, Hope was sitting there, and I could see she was like just staring at me through the whole presentation, just a big grin. And we got done, and she has the most postal passion, I'm telling you, of anybody, and just so thrilled to have a kindred spirit, somebody that just really appreciates the value of mail, understands that the address is really the beginning of the entire journey with that, and also, you know, again, shares that spirit of, hey, high touch, high tech, combined together with mail really creates an amazing multi-sensory, multi-channel opportunity for a lot of our customers. Hope, you know, Cathedral Corporation does a lot of mail, and they do some very interesting types of mailings. Could you just briefly share with our listeners and viewers today a little bit about Cathedral and maybe a little bit of your experience, please?
Yeah, sure. I've been with Cathedral now for almost 8 years. It's been a joy every year. It's always a learning curve with the post office and all the changes that are happening there. But here at the Cathedral, we have 5 different facilities. We're processing more than 500 million data points at any given time throughout the year. Or 500 million. We're doing all types of mail, a lot of marketing mail. We do direct and a lot of online services as well. We're constantly changing to go with the new postal changing in the environment, and I can't tell you how fun it is for me. And I don't know if there's anybody more passionate than you about postal, Chris.
Okay.
Perfect. I don't know anybody else who knows the DMM like you do, but I think it's always learning, and that's what my passion. I love to be constantly learning and ebbing with the flow. So I coming from somebody who works with data on every day, love me some spreadsheets. The importance of clean data is like my goal for everything, because it makes it so that, you know, we in our industry can be the most efficient in what we do. So, you know, I'm looking forward to what we have to talk about and taking questions at the end.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hope. You know, wow, 500 million mail pieces annually. That's pretty impressive. And I know that you service a lot of different size of types of customers, but the one thing that really is ubiquitous, regardless of whether we're talking 100 pieces or 100 million pieces for a mailing, is the address. And when I think about address quality, folks, I think about the 3C approach to address quality, what I call a complete, correct, and current address. It really is the only way to get timely, predictable, and ultimate delivery of a mail piece. Without a 3C approach in the address, it's kind of like calling the wrong phone number and getting the right person. It's not going to happen. So making that investment in address quality up front is really, really going to be key to be able to do that. And when I talk about complete, correct, and current, you know, completing the address, making sure that all of the required elements are present with that. That's the ZIP+4, the street name, the city, the state, even the directional, you know, whether it's north, south, east, or west. Boy, that makes a huge, huge difference. We're talking over 160, actually about 165 million delivery points that the Postal Service has to deliver to 6 days a week now. That's all part of the law that was passed in April of last year. So 6 days a week, 165 million delivery points. And, you know, the Postal Service doesn't have 800,000 employees anymore, right? It's half that to be able to go out and make that happen. So my point on that is you cannot rely on the carrier's personal knowledge as your data quality solution. You've got to do this 3C approach. So get the address complete, make sure the address is correct, have all the proper spellings, abbreviations, that the zip code matches the city and state. There's a whole publication, publication 28, that talks about that. The good thing is that a lot of that's built into the software now, which we'll talk about. So getting it complete, correct, and then keeping it current. You know, Hope, before we're done with today's webinar, over 6,500 people will file a change of address with the Postal Service. Businesses, families, individuals. Think about that, Hope. 6,500 an hour. And I'm probably being a little bit generous on that, because That's only about 60% of the actual moves that are filed. There's a lot of people, a lot of folks, millennials, for example, that don't, normally file. I know you file change of addresses with the Postal
Yes.
Service. You're in the club, right? Like a lot of us here, right? We're going to do that. But surprisingly, a lot don't. Did you realize it was that many an hour?
No, and I don't understand because when you do that change of address, the post office sends you that little like moving kit that gives you coupons. Like who doesn't want to get some free money in the mail?
Exactly. A great way to get started on the right path with that.
Mhm.
So again, it is important to keep that complete, correct, and current. By the way, speaking of mail and millennials, shout out to the Office of the Inspector General. Did a fantastic report on mail and millennials. If you check out USPS OIG and take a look at that, I think you're going to find some very interesting information. In fact, take a look at all their reports. They do some great work over at the OIG. But you know what? Even though we've got this 3C approach, and I've been talking about this again, I've been in the industry for 30 years, we still have a UAA problem, undeliverable as addressed mail. In 2022, the Postal Service reported over 5.5 billion pieces. 5.5 billion pieces were undeliverable as addressed mail. Over 3 billion for marketing mail, over 2 billion for first class mail. And Hope, what really makes me sad about this is the cost and the lost opportunity. $1.3 billion, right? And look at that, from forwarded mail, returned mail, treated as waste. That's really, really tragic. In fact, that's the definition of junk mail, right? $274 million just thrown away, never had a chance to deliver. And Hope, guess who's paying for the $1.3 billion?
Well, we are.
That's
taxpayers.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, the mailing industry, right? I mean, the mailing industry is paying that. It's not like the Post Service is carrying a debt of $1.3 billion for UAA mail. We are. If UAA went away or reduced, we could argue that the postage rates would be able to go down because the Post Service isn't spending all that money, as you see on the bottom there, that $1 billion, to take care of a problem that we could resolve up front with it. Now, Hope, like I said, I've been in the mailing industry for 30 years. Do you mind sharing with our audience here what year did you get started?
About 2017, just before is when I started getting really into the postal heavy.
Got it. Okay, so after the Great Recession, and you can see here on the slide, the bar at the left here, fiscal year 2008, when we had, all this mail. There was a time where we were over 200 billion pieces of mail annually. But it has dropped precipitously. The Great Recession dropped that down in 2009. You can see that most of the mail that dropped was wasted mail, the mail that's in green. But after that, you see it stayed relatively constant. There was another drop, of course, recently in 2020 due to the COVID effect. A lot of companies, particularly retail, closed their businesses temporarily or sadly went out of business altogether. So we did see a decline in the waste mail with that. But then it started creeping back up again. So we still have a UAA problem here. Again, a lot of it forwarded and returned to sender. And regardless of what the disposition is for UAA, wasted, returned to sender, or forwarded, you've still missed the opportunity. You've still gotten the mail piece to the customer late for that great sale that you were trying to promote. You got the tickets to the customer late for the event that you were hoping they were going to attend. And of course, if it was wasted, what a tragedy. And that's just postage too, by the way. Hope, think about how much it costs, right? All in, and you don't have to share the numbers, but think about what it costs, for your customers on a per mail piece. Postage is just a part of that pie, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. We actually just had that scenario yesterday. We had a customer who brought us a mailing, not a very large one, but they were adamant they didn't want us to process the data at all. They wanted to leave it as is because that's how they got it from their end user. And we explained all the benefits for us or for them, and in the long run would save them money. And unfortunately, they still wanted to run it, and they got 23% return on that mailing. Now that they're going to be responsible to pay for it because their addresses just were not clean, they were not accurate, or are not updated. So there's like this huge benefit, even for this small mailing. It was a lot of extra money that they were paying for that didn't need to happen.
So you're saying over 20% of the mailing was returned or was UAA? Is that what? Yep. Wow, that's sad. 1 out of 5 pieces of mail.
Yes.
I mean, think about that. If you were prospecting, right, and you wanted to get a response rate, right, and if 20% of it's just not even going to make it there, if you had fixed that, your response rate would have gone a lot higher, and then your overall return on
Yes.
investment for that marketing effort, if that was a marketing effort, would have been
Mhm.
much better. Yeah, that's unfortunate. So that's
Yeah.
one way, folks, to be able to increase the efficacy, if you will, of your marketing campaigns. Do a little investment on that UAA up front. And the good news is that there is a ton of data now available that really is included with your CAS certified software. And this is something, Hope, when, like I said, I've been involved for a long time. Way back in the early 2000s, the Postal Service really started rolling out some of these new data sets. I had the pleasure of working and being involved with the Mailers Technical Advisory Committee on the addressing part focus area for MTAC, as it's called. And I had a chance to work side by side with some great people. Jim Wilson from the National Customer Support Center, he recently retired. Jim was fantastic. With the Postal Service, he began to roll out a lot of these different technologies, and the industry started adopting that. And so we began to build sort of this, what I think of as a pyramid, layers upon layers of data that we can leverage to help achieve that complete, correct, and current address. And it all begins with the CAS certified software. CAS certified software establishes the ZIP+4, and then once we have that ZIP+4, we can then look to see, is that truly a deliverable point or not by the Postal Service, and that's where DPV comes in. We can look at data like LaxLink, the locatable address conversion system, the SweetLink product for business secondary addresses, and then we get into updating the address with the National Change of Address database, the addressee not known, which is an indicator that somebody moved more than 18 months ago, and then of course the address change service, which is a post-mailing move update from the Postal Service. And I'm going to explain each one of these in a minute here, and Hope I'll be looking for kind of your thoughts on it too again. But these really build upon each other, one layer after another, all towards getting that standardized, validated, and updated address. So we have a 3C approach in address quality. We're going to start first with CAS. Like I said, it's the foundation. CAS is the coding accuracy support system. Hope, I'm a child of the 80s, so when I was rocking out to Flock of Seagulls and Depeche Mode back in the late 80s and early 90s, the Jim Wilson, I mentioned his name, and the amazing folks at the National Customer Support Center, they created CAS. And so what is CAS? It's a benchmark. It's a standard for software providers to make sure that we are assigning the address with the proper ZIP+4, ZIP+4 code for an address within a range of address. For example, if I've got an address, Hope, of like 123 Main Street, well, if Main Street runs from 100 to 150, 123 should be there because it fits in the range, right?
Right.
So that's how we get that ZIP+4 in there. And Hope, one of the things that I've often been asked is, why, if CAS is sort of the standard, why do the different software products all behave differently? And my answer to that, well, you have a driver's license, Hope. I know you drive, right? You drove to our last information exchange when we hosted it in Rochester. Actually, just a preview. It's going to be in Chicago this year, but more about that in just a moment. But yeah, so you've got a driver's license. I've got a driver's license. But nobody knows how many times I knocked the cones over, right? When I was taking my test. You just know that we have a little driver's license, but the secret is my wife is so much better at backing up trailers and driving the big motorhome. I get scared by that, so I let her do all that really scary stuff. I can drive the car forward, and that's all I need to worry about, right? She can parallel park and everything. So that's my point, right? Is that even though the data is the same across the products, the fact of the matter is how we parse the address, how we match the address, how we put the zip code, and assemble it all together. That part of it is a little bit unique for each one of ours. It's kind of like everybody's got spaghetti sauce, but it's all a little bit different. So that's kind of what CAS is. It forms that foundation. And CAS returns these special codes. Hope you're probably familiar with some of these codes. And you can see the one in green, number 31, right? That's the good code, and that's the one that you want to look for. Are there any of these that you often see, maybe from some of your customers, Hope, as you're running the products?
Traditionally it's 10 and 21. It's invalid address or address not found. That's traditionally what we get kicked back.
Okay, and so again, that an invalid address or an address not found, and our recommendation, and that's why I've color coded these, is that you really shouldn't be mailing to those, or they need to go through a much deeper scrub as you become a data detective to try and uncover that. The two that are in yellow, I will call those out because that typically is either a multiple response, meaning I can't determine which. There's a ZIP+4 in there somewhere, but I can't guess. I'm not allowed to guess with it. So I'll tell you, I'm not sure on that one. And then the 32 means that I've got a zip plus 4 for you, usually for a high-rise apartment. But if you really want to know what floor Chrisaline lives on, for example, you need to do a little bit of a deeper scrub with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we get into DPV. I'm sorry, Hope, were you going to add anything to that? Okay.
You can go ahead.
All right. And so the next step is the DPV, and that's where we try to go a little bit further in our data detective work. Initially, DPV was optional with CAS, and now Post Service and the mailing software community have blended this in. So now this is included with your CAS software. And really what it does is it tells you whether or not the Postal Service is delivering to that address or not. And here you see the example, 104 Main Street. While you might get a zip plus 4 of 6038 on it, the reality is that because the Postal Service doesn't deliver there, DPV would remove that zip code. So what CAS may give it, DPV can take it away. And it all comes down to these special codes again. And we call these footnote codes, right? Like my little comments there, I hope I can see you smiling. And so these DPV footnote codes, these are valuable codes. In fact, the DPV footnote codes, in my opinion, are among the most important because they're going to tell you information or attributes about the address. Is it a military address? Is it general delivery? Again, if it's good, you know, it's gonna be AA or BB. And I'll tell you what, I always loved those letters in college. I was lucky to get the C, right? But if you get an AA and a BB, that's great because that means you've matched it completely, all the components, and that is an address you should mail. The ones in yellow are the ones that always kind of jump out at me as needing additional data scrubbing. Hope, when you are running the software, do you leverage these codes to kind of help make decision, like a decision tree, and how you're going to process this, or do you share this information back with your customers?
Yeah, I was going to say both either CAS or through here, we do a lot of use it as a way to feedback and build a relationship with our customers. Okay, we processed your data, you know, and here's what we want to do to help you move forward to get a better response, better delivery, right? So like A1, that happens a lot for New England when their zip code starts with a 0, depending on how it processes through, it'll drop that 0. And so it'll kick back. So we knew internally to fix it. And then sometimes it kicks back to the customer to say, we are on top of it. We already got it for you. Or if we're having an issue with the addressing, we'll kick back and say, hey, we have this list of addresses that aren't coming back with anything or having concerns with. Let us help you get that data all cleared up so that we can get the most amount of mail to your end users, as well as get it in a proper destination.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Just to kind of touch on a few more in the pyramid here, LaxLink is something that came out. This is the locatable address conversion system. So these are not people that have moved, but the municipality, not the Postal Service, the municipality, township, city, town, hamlet. When I lived in Rochester, the LaxLink product is really just a way for the municipality to communicate to the industry that they've renamed a street or renumbered a street. Maybe they've added some more houses. 1.7 million new delivery points in 2021, I believe, with the Postal Service. So just recently, they had over 1 million new delivery points each year. May have renumbered the street to take advantage of that. Or you've gone from a rural route to a street style address. And growing up in northern Minnesota, I saw that firsthand. So, you know, this is important information. The house or the dwelling or the business has not moved. It's just had its address converted. So LaxLink is a very important tool to be able to find that. And I know, Hope, we were chatting before the other day. That might be a situation. We won't go into the details, but you were sharing with me a customer that, hey, this is my address. It's the one I've always been using for years, but the Postal Service, for whatever reason, thinks it's a different address. It's a possibility that was a LaxLink thing that got picked up. And
yeah, I actually reached out to them yesterday after we had talked because you had updated me on this a little bit, and I did some more research, and that's really what it is. And we think that that's where it's kind of stuck in that limbo. And they were unaware of that change that had happened on the municipality level. So they had been continually using it. So now we have to go through an update, nonprofit information, CRID information, all that addressing, because all these changes will come through. And then hopefully once that's all done, which we're in the process of right now, I got to send the fax over after this call, and then we'll go ahead and everything should work fine going forward. So it's, you know, a very useful tool. Yeah.
Okay, so here you go, folks. LaxLink is a very important piece of the puzzle, and in that case, Hope, that solved what was really going on with that customer's mail situation. Another product that was rolled out was called SuiteLink, and SuiteLink is a very interesting product. This is for suites or businesses where they've got a secondary address, as we call it, like a suite number or a unit number. But again, only for businesses. This is not for residential. The Postal Service does not have an apartment link product, for example, because the feeling is that went a little bit too far for the Privacy Act of 1974. But for businesses, this is fine. And so this is something that's kind of voluntary. The businesses is submitting that information, the Postal Service is aggregating that information, and the software will leverage SweetLink. I expect that data to continue to grow as we continue to work with it. But SweetLink is something, if you're doing business mailings, you're going to want to make sure that you understand how SweetLink works and are able to leverage that data accordingly. Now, I want to just briefly talk about CAS Cycle O, and Hope, it's been a long time since we've had a CAS cycle or go through the CAS certification process. And the letter O is, we've been following the alphabet. You see back in the late 80s and 90s, we started with CAS cycle A and then B and C, and you can sing the song. And we got all the way to the letter N, and we thought, yes, no more N is for no more CAS cycles. We're done. We climbed the mountain, we got everything done, and then they came out and said,
you're wrong.
They said, oh no, we're doing another CAS cycle. No, this is really good. And I will tell you that even though it's been several years, gosh, maybe 5 or more years, since we did the last round of CAS certified software, there are some really interesting new data sets the Postal Service is now able to make available for us. And many software vendors, including BCC Software, are already certified for CAS Cycle O. You should be seeing that software released probably in April, maybe no later than May. We're hoping to try and get CAS Cycle O certified software to all of our customers in April. We definitely don't want to wait till July, because we want to make sure you get comfortable with the Cycle O stuff before we get into the July 9 price increases. But let me talk a little bit about what's in CAS Cycle O. The first is more data for the DPV product, and actually the DSF, that's a delivery sequence file. If you're doing saturation mailings, you would run the file through DSF. And companies like BCC Software happen to be a direct licensee of that data, so that's something that you can run through. But DPV is actually a subset of DSF. So DSF is sort of like the mothership, and DPV is sort of this little piece that they made available to the industry. And they've added some new data to it and expanded some of the reason codes for it. And I'll talk about it. This is all of the ones that they've done here, but I'm going to call out a couple on here that I thought were really interesting. There's a lot of information about CAS Cycle O, so check with the software provider that you work with and make sure that you understand what's in there. But I do want to call out a couple that I thought were really interesting. DNA, door not accessible. This is new data from the Postal Service that's going to tell us if they cannot directly access the door to deliver mail in the mailbox, or in some cases the parcel as well. And you can see some examples here. Maybe it's a long driveway, right, and they can't get to it with the mailbox, or there's a gated community with that. So that's going to come back with a yes or no flag, a Y or N that tells you, yes, we can get to it, or no, we can't, or yes, if the door is not accessible, we can't get to that. So that could be a problem. Again, if you're trying to deliver something, maybe something of high value, that you want to make sure you understand with that. NSL, no secure location. This one I thought was also very interesting, and it's really an opportunity where the postal carrier, the letter carrier, is making a determination. In this case, their feeling is that that delivery point is just not really secure enough to leave a package behind. And so they're going to indicate that. So if you're doing high value packages or samples or something like that, the NSL indicator may be something that you'll want to look at to better understand as you, as a mail owner or a mail service provider, can help make a decision for your customer. Maybe there's a different alternative address that you could deliver that to for the customer to pick up or something like that. And NDD, if you're doing business mailings, non-delivery days, this is an indicator of businesses that may be closed on a Monday or a Tuesday or something like that. You know, there's a lot of restaurants in Minnesota that I've noticed that happen to be closed on Monday. And I saw it in Rochester too, in fact, Rochester, New York, when we lived there. So this would indicate whether or not that business was closed on a particular day of the week. And so I think that this could be a great value for companies that are doing business mailings. Again, it's not for residential. There is a flag, by the way, in the DSF database. Remember I told you that's sort of like the mothership to the DPV data. That tells you if that address is seasonal. You know, they're snowbirds. They spend the summer in Minnesota, but you know, in the wintertime they're down in Arizona. Don't you know, it's too cold up here. So NDD NDD is just for businesses. It's not for residential. You heard that come out there because I know you're.
I love it. It brings me home.
Brings you home, doesn't it? DPV footnotes, we are refining these. And again, data is everything. And I'm super glad that the Postal Service is helping to redefine what these footnote codes mean. Because remember, as I mentioned before, and hope you had shared before, how that's an important set of clues that you leverage when communicating with your customers and making decisions. So now we've got a few new ones, the C1 and so forth. These are all about the secondary address and the primary number. So did the input primary number match to the DPV? But the secondary couldn't be confirmed, but it is required. So sometimes that secondary address really is required to be able to get the ZIP+4. Maybe it's an informed address identified, and that's something new that the Postal Service is going to be doing as part of the informed delivery program. There's more on that. Maybe it matched to the primary number, but we had to drop the trailing alpha, 123A, South Avenue or something like that. They dropped the alpha, took the A off, and now we got a match with that. Or if it's a PO box, street address. These are situations people live, at a particular address. Maybe they've got a PO box because that's where they want to get their mail. But some online merchants won't send products fulfillment to a PO box. So what you can do is you can go to the Postal Service and get a street style address that looks like it looks like you're in an apartment, when in fact it's actually the PO box. So it's a street style address or a PO box street address, PBSA we call them, and that's new information that we can identify with that, and so forth. So again, new information. We've clarified a little bit of this. A lot of it's about secondary addresses because that's now become more of a primary concern for UAA as we continue to work on fixing that. So now I want to talk a little bit about current. Up to this point, Hope, we've been focused a lot on getting the address complete. We've focused a lot about getting it correct. And this is the point where we start to pivot a little bit because now we add the name of the occupant to the address. Before this, Hope, we didn't have anything with the name. Now the name is important. And I know a lot of folks, and I actually kind of peeked at the chat here, have talked about, hey, HIPAA is a concern or privacy is a concern, and I can't change the address because that's what that customer works with. I hear you and I understand, and we'll try and address that a little bit either at the end of the presentation or maybe when I go through this. But the key here is that the Postal Service, when we look at UAA cost and volume, as I shared before, Hope, a lot of it is related to exactly the fact that the address is not current. The National Change of Address, or NCOA link, came out in the mid-2000s, and the whole idea behind this was to try and provide the new change of address in a very secure and reliable manner for either the software provider, so you can have it in-house and use it on your own software, become a licensee yourself. And in fact, some companies that are concerned about letting customer data out of their facility, and again, somebody had mentioned HIPAA in one of the chat groups, that's one way that you can resolve that. Well, then instead of sending the address out, become an NCOA link licensee and do it in-house. But NCOA link does do the change of address. The average correction rate is about 3.32%. So it's again, for those change of addresses that we can get an exact match to. And there are some different licenses available with that. BCC software, for example, happens to be a full service license, meaning that we get the full 48 months or 4 years worth of change of address data from the Postal Service. Some are a limited service provider, LSP. They get 18 months worth of data. And you could also be an end user mailer. I'd mentioned somebody that wants to bring it in-house, like a mail owner. You can get that for the 18 month as well. NCOA link's a pre-mailing method, and one of the great things about NCOA link is it returns data. So again, your software is talking, you should be listening to it because these codes are really, really important. And Hope, I'm curious, there's a couple of codes I'm going to call out here, and I'm wondering if you've seen these, but A, of course, just like school, A means that we got a match, it's a good match, and here's the new address. But when we get into like 91 and 92, that means the secondary address was kind of a concern, right? So secondary addresses are a primary concern now for us. And then we get to the ones on the bottom here, that 01, 2, and 3. Somebody's moved out of the country. Somebody has moved, but they didn't tell the Postal Service, but the carrier knows that, Crystalline doesn't live there anymore. Or they stopped paying on their PO box, right? Which is kind of the same thing. So these MLNAs and BCNOs, as we call them, matching codes 0, 2, and 3, are really changes that the Postal Service put in the database, but aren't actually change of addresses filed by the customer. Hope, how many of these, I mean, is this something that you see sometimes with your customers, and is this part of the conversation that you might have?
Absolutely, especially the foreign. We actually have quite a bit of business work that we do,
Okay.
and that is frequently a response. So we have a separate way to take care of that particular mail as we process the data. But all of the NCOA work that we do or data that we do process through there, we have a process in place to kick back to our clients and say, let's work together. Again, it's that communication with the clients and trying to get the data clean for our next run. So NCOA is one of my favorite things, to be honest with you, because it's such a smooth, worked out process for us and for the post office right now. But yeah, the former is what we see mostly.
Good, good. Okay. And thank you for sharing that. And I should point out that 01, 02, and 03, if you see those codes and you put those mail pieces in the mailbox, you just absolutely contributed to UAA mail. And worse, and I've actually seen this sadly with a couple of customers, is they also put what are called endorsements or ancillary service endorsements on the mail piece. You've seen that, address service requested or reporting
Electronic service requested, yep.
Some of those service codes, those ancillary service endorsements, some of those, there's a cost that comes back to you for using that service. If you have an 01, 2, or 3, for goodness sake, do not put those into the mail piece, a mail stream with an ancillary service endorsement, because you just basically gave a donation to the Postal Service, because that's what's going to happen is they're going to come back and they're going to charge you. And in one case, I had a customer and it was a 5-figure invoice that they weren't expecting, and it very, very expensive.
That's scary.
Yeah, very scary. So, and the damage is done. There's no way to get that back. I mean, the Postal Service did the service. So be careful on those particular ones. Now, you are going to get most of the codes you get back though for NCOA Link are the non-matching records. These are codes, and we used to call these NICSes at one time. I like footnote codes better or return codes better, because when I think of NICSes, I think of like Peter Pan and stuff like that. I guess that's a pixie, right? But anyway, the return codes for non-matching records, and you can see here, there's a lot of reasons why we can't find a change of address match, because NCOA Link is very, very conservative. It has to make sure that it's complying with the Privacy Act of 1974, and there's a whole bunch of postal laws around the Postal Service making this data available. So they're very, very conservative about making sure that you have to have the original old style address in order to get the new address. And if you can't get a match, it'll tell you why. And this maybe gives you an opportunity to go back, scrub the data a little bit more, maybe take another look at that DPV code, or maybe go back to your customer and talk to them about some of these codes and see what's happening. Is that some of the dialogue that you have with your customers with some of these codes as well, Hope?
Yeah, we have several different ways depending on the client's requirements, right? If either we can send it to them through email or onto our online portal, or we'll actually, depending on the severity of it, to have a direct call and have a conversation. And sometimes we won't even mail yet. We'll say, let's try this again. Let's get these updates in. We can help you, and we'll try it again and see what happens after we do the updates, because it's obviously we don't want UAA, and for them or for us.
Right, right. And I should point out too, and we're going to kind of get to this in a moment, NCOA Link or some kind of a move update method, and I should really preface it that way. NCOA Link is one of several options that you have to comply with the move update requirement. The Postal Service requires some move update methodology to be done at least 95 days prior to the mailing.
Yes.
NCOA Link is a great way to do that because it's a pre-mailing move update method. So not only are you complying with the Postal Service's requirement, you're helping to make sure the address is complete, correct, and current. There are some post-mailing methods. I mentioned the ancillary service endorsement. I'm going to talk a little bit about ACS in a moment, address change service. Or you could actually just put or current resident, which is what we call alternative addressing to go on the mail piece. The only problem with or postal, or current resident or something like that, it makes a personalized message kind of tough. Hey, this is just for you, Chrisline, or the next guy there. It's kind of not quite as effective, when you get into that. And actually, that leads me to the ACS. So up to this point, everything we've talked about is pre-mailing move update and address quality. ACS, address change service, is a post-mailing service. This is the Postal Service's technology that looks at the name and address. So as they're looking at the name and address, first of all, to make sure that they can route it properly and that you did earn the discounts that you're claiming in the Intelligent Mail barcode or on the optional endorsement line. But they're also checking to see, did you actually update that name and address, right? Now, ACS will catch change of addresses that occurred that NCOA Link was not able to pick up because the Post Service is sort of a closed system, if you will. And
Mhm.
ACS is also a great way to pick up change of addresses that may have occurred since you did the mailing through the NCUA link. As I mentioned
Mhm.
before, 6,500 an hour, hope in 95 days, that's a lot of changes. It's a lot of
Yeah.
change. A lot of people have moved, right? So I always recommend ACS, and that's why it's in sort of this pyramid stack,
Mhm.
because it does help with change of address,
Mhm.
and it also provides very important clues. And you can see some of these return codes on the screen here. And these are some really great pieces of information that the carrier is now able to communicate back, in many cases through their mobile delivery devices. These are
Mhm.
our electronic devices that the letter carriers are carrying with them. Initially, they were for packages. I still primarily use them for packages to scan the barcode for the package for delivery purposes. But the
Mhm.
MDD devices now can capture a lot of information about UAA codes and things like, the individual deceased. BCC offers a deceased suppression service, but for ACS, that's another way to be able to pick that information up
Mhm.
from the letter carrier. Or maybe it's no mail receptacle, letter M, right? If the
Mhm.
snowplow came by and knocked over your mailbox, that would be an M, your no mail
Mhm.
receptacle. And yeah, that's happened before. That occurred here in northern Minnesota. But so they've got all these different reasons and things like that you'll see on there. Maybe the address was illegible or insufficient and so forth. So ACS, my point on this is great information. And for those of you that are using ACS and are using the paper report that comes from the Postal Service with the return codes, you're
Mhm.
going to need to switch to the electronic method.
Mhm.
Beginning July 9th, the Postal Service is not going to be providing the paper ACS reports anymore. So please talk to your software provider,
Mhm.
understand how the ACS electronic file works, and then use that to update the information. Hope
Mhm.
to, do you folks use ACS? Any of your customers
Mhm.
work with this, and have you found this valuable?
Mhm. So NCUA requires a PAF, so we have a lot of customers that don't want to do that. So all of our data processes through ACS, and I can't tell you the importance of the P code for deceased for a large majority of the type of mail that we do here in house.
Okay.
Um, it happens unfortunately more frequently than you would want, and
Yeah.
sometimes our customers aren't able to update their databases, or it slips their mind, and this catches it before we send that mailing out. And for like a spouse, that can be, upsetting. So catching that
Right.
ahead of time using ACS, I can't tell you how many times we've gone back to, a client and said, hey, we had this return. Do you want to remove them? We want to change the name on it. What do you want to do? And they're so thankful that, oh,
Yeah.
I totally forgot to do that. I thank you for catching it. It's again another way to do that relationship building with customers. But for me, seeing that one specifically come back is it's like, oh, thank God we caught it before we sent it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And again, back to some of the questions in the chat group or the concerns raised. If you've got a customer that says, "Hey, listen, you can't change my address. I'm not going to allow you to change my address before I do the mailing." Okay, there's one. This may be another way to be able to do something, because this is the Postal Service, right? So the mail service provider isn't changing it. The Postal Service is changing that address and then communicating that information to you so that you've got that for future mailing
Mm-hmm.
purposes. So again, another different strategy with it. All of this is designed, folks, to make sure we get the right mail piece. Again, that timely, predictable, and ultimate delivery of the mail piece. That's the end goal. With that, these are just different tools in the tool bag to help make that happen. And the way that we leverage a lot of this is just a couple of screenshots out of what the Mail Manager product. Your products may be different depending on what you work with. But here, hope you can see, our input address, Chris Ryan at 1600 Elm Woods, Rochester, New York. You'd look at that just for the human eyes and think, well, that looks like a fairly complete address. Yeah, it's missing the zip code, but everything seems to be right. No, there's a lot of problems with that, right? There's no Elm Woods, it's Elmwood, and it's an avenue, not a street or a circle or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's in Rochester. And yes, we can get a zip plus 4, 14620, 3862 for the zip plus 4. But looking at the return codes, we see it's 32 and that there's a problem with the secondary address. So here's a great example of where we may have gotten the zip plus 4 for discounts, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not getting the proper delivery. So it's not just about discounts, folks. It's about delivery. That's what we're trying to get. So in this case,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you got a postage discount for free sorting, but it's not going to arrive the way that you were hoping or expecting for your customer, because we don't know if Chris Ryan lives on the second floor or the first floor. And here we can see, if we tunnel into the postal provided data, there's a range for the secondary addresses, depending on what floor that customer lives on. And you may have a different zip plus 4, as you can see on the left part of the slide here, depending on what floor, in this case, Chris Ryan's living in. So you want to dig a little bit deeper into it. I mentioned before, there is no apartment link product in the Postal Service, but some companies, some software providers, BCC is one of them, offer additional address cleansing solutions. And what we've done is we've sort of inserted strategically industry data into that pyramid stack I talked about. So we're blending USPS compliant data tools, and I mentioned those before, now with industry data, and doing that in a way to sort of go beyond. In our case, for BCC, we call it ARS, Address Resolution Service, to append the apartment. That's the apartment link type concept, but now using industry data. It can also fix some things in the address. And then we also have PCOA. We call that proprietary change of address. Other companies have different names for that as well. So you want to check with who you're working with to see if that's available. But we insert that between the validation step, the sweet link, before we go into the update, because the very last thing you want to do is N2A link. You want to make sure you always end with N2A link, regardless of what you're doing with the name and address prior to that. And Hope, I mentioned, ARS is really a powerful solution here. We can take transposed primary numbers. If somebody typed in they had 231 Main Street, maybe they'd come back and say there is no zip plus 4 because Main Street doesn't go beyond 150 or even 200. And here it was somebody transposed it. And the way that ARS works on this is it looks at the name and sees, well, John Smith is the one and only person living on Main Street, and so we can help with that. And how do we know that John Smith is at that address? Maybe they filled out a warranty registration card for something, or they submitted their information through some other channel, and then a data aggregator collected that data. We work with a partner, for example, that aggregates that data, and then we can make that available to our customers. And then the secondary address, this is your apartment 10, right? So John Smith lives at Main Street, and he happens to be in apartment 10 because he got that 40-inch television, or maybe it's a 60-inch now. I don't know. Those are pretty inexpensive now for those flat screen TVs, and filled out that warranty card for that place. And then proprietary change of address. Hope, there's something called chained addressing, and you may have seen this in some of the files that you work with, but if somebody moves from one point to another point to another point, we actually saw a lot of that in the last couple of years here, probably because of COVID and the housing situation with home values and things like that. But a lot of people started kind of changing their addresses more frequently than 18 months, maybe every 6 months or 12 months they were moving, or maybe it's a student or something like that. And so the problem is that if they don't file their change of address with each step along the process, the chain is broken. So PCOA can be a really powerful way for prospecting mailings if you're trying to find somebody, and it can find a change of address that maybe they told a business associate. Again, maybe they told the magazine subscriber direct, the magazine company directly because they want their Sports Illustrated, or maybe they told again the retail outfit because they wanted to fill out the warranty registration card. So that data is collected, and then we can change. So in this case, we can see that this individual lived at their parents' house on Elm Street. They moved into an apartment, didn't tell the Postal Service, but they did buy a house, so they filled out a change of address. But that didn't get set up properly, and so we use the PCOA as a way to sort of reconnect the link on that. And then N2A link take us all the way from the beginning to the end. Is chain addressing something that you've seen, Hope?
Yeah, it definitely is come up a couple times. I want to say though that like the PCOA and ARS, they seem to be, in my opinion, the ultimate help me help you, us working with the post office to get those addresses as accurate as possible by helping us maintain accurate and bouncing off these different areas. It's so exciting to me, to see us as an industry trying our best to also work with the post office to do their best.
Agreed. Now, Hope, we're gonna talk just a few more slides here, folks. Just kind of talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the trenches, and you'd mentioned before. So the PAF, the process acknowledgement form, sometimes that can be a pain, can it? Right? It's a pain in the path, but it's a necessary thing. Let me explain what a PAF is just briefly. So the process acknowledgement form is a way that the Postal Service can comply with the Privacy Act of 1974. Postal Service is I'll say a kind of a quasi-government entity. Yes, it's enshrined in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, and codified in Title 39. But but it has to operate as a business. But what the Postal Service is doing is they're collecting change of addresses as a government entity. And to be able to leverage that government collected information, we want to make sure that the Postal Service understands who is the list owner, who is the broker or the agent that's acting on behalf of them. We think of that as the mail service provider. And then who is the licensee? Who is the company that has licensed the NCOA data from the Postal Service to be able to do these changes? And so that's why the PAF is so important, because it helps the Postal Service comply with the Privacy Act. And it is something that's required, but Hope, you've shared with me that it's difficult for customers to understand this or to fill this or sign it.
They don't, we have to really have a comfortable explanation with our customers and say, listen, this is, I understand your privacy and I understand your end user's privacy or your end delivery privacy, but this is what this is for. It's to keep that privacy between us and explaining that, you know, we don't have to use that addressing, but it's a way for you to keep your lists accurate and our processing accurate so that you get the best return on the mail that you're sending.
Agreed. And you know, there's another phrase that's become very popular within this industry, and that's chain of custody. So PAF, another way to look at that, this is the way to document the chain of custody for the data. The list owner gave that name and address to the agent broker, who in turn sent that to the licensee to be able to process, went back to the agent broker, and then back to the list owner. So it creates a chain of custody. That's really the way I look at this, and hopefully that's a way to help with it. There is a legal restraint. For those of you that say absolutely positively, I cannot do that. There's a process to follow. It's a little bit complicated that you can go through with the Postal Service. You still have to use NCOA link, but what ends up happening is you mail two pieces, one to the new address, one to the old address, and there's a way to be able to comply with that. We've helped a handful of customers. More often than not, what I've found is that there's just a concern or an angst with the mail owner on filling this out or understanding it. So I definitely hear your concerns with that, Hope. But you know, as a Cathedral is a mail service provider, you're processing mail on behalf of your customers. In a lot of ways, you're on the front line. You're responsible for the address quality. And sometimes customers just absolutely refuse, you mentioned before, to do the change of address. And you could be at risk for some pretty significant penalties, right? How often are you seeing like mailer scorecard problems with change of address and NCOA like this?
Well, that's a big part of my job. We see it all the time. And that really affects that endorsement that we put on that piece. When we have a customer that's pretty obstinate to do this, and said, well, we're gonna, work on doing a return service request.
Right.
Because we're telling you that, we can tell you that this data has these concerns and we can make these changes, but you're saying that, listen, this is the data they provided to us, the addressing they wanted. I don't want to change that, and I want to make sure that it goes where they think it needs to go. So then we say, well, we're going to do a return service request, and the effects of that is those pieces are going to be returned to you, and that'll be a charge you're going to have to take in. But we, being on the front line, I spend a lot of my time working back and forth on the mailer scorecard and trying to make sure that we're not getting assessments, because again, we do our best to send out mail as current, complete, and accurate.
Yep, agreed. Yeah, and that's unfortunate. I've talked to some mailers where, these are not trivial penalties. These are thousands of dollars. So it's very costly. And again, it's not just the cost of the UAA or the scorecard issue, which is a problem. It's a lost opportunity by not having that mail piece delivered or delivered in a timely manner with that as well. Mail owners, again, a lot of cases, this is interesting, you share this with me, is they sort of assume that the Postal Service, well, it's a government entity, like, I kind of mentioned before. It's like, why aren't they getting all the government change of addresses? Don't they talk to these other entities like the DMV and the Social Security Administration?
DMV and state. State and federal, I should say, state and federal.
Yeah, I always think that they somehow communicate with each other and don't realize they're really siloed, aren't they, in a lot of cases. There was a while back when deceased suppression notification, we had talked, again, I mentioned Jim Wilson, we had talked about, is there a way that the Social Security Administration could share that deceased data with the industry through NCOA link? Could we do like a pre-mailing deceased link, somehow blend that together? And after it went through various discussions with legal entities and stuff, they're like, no, it's not permissible. So unfortunately, again, if and I appreciate you mentioned it before, if deceased suppression is something that's important, there is a service to do it up front, or as you were mentioning before, Hope, you can leverage the ACS data and that indicator code that'll tell you that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the future of address quality, as we kind of wrap this up here, where do I think things are going? Secure destruction is one area. I would say that fits into address quality. This is a piece that's been deemed undeliverable as address for whatever reason with the Post Service, but the mail owner wants it destroyed securely. This is more applicable to first-class letters and flats. I did have some customers ask me about applying that to postcards. So that is something that we're looking at in making that available for postcards as well for first-class mail. But of course, if it's marketing mail, the Post Service just simply throws it away with that. And unfortunately, that's still UAA mail. NCUA link single address correction and co-alert. These kind of are two ideas, and they were concepts that came up before. I still put them on the list here. I'd love to see a single address correction for NCUA link. I think the industry and the mailing software community can demonstrate to the Post Service that we're able to do that responsibly. But right now, the rules are you need to have 100 unique names and addresses before you can even begin the NCUA link process. So there has to be at least 100 unique names and addresses, and that's really a shared responsibility. The NCUA link licensee, certainly has requirements for the 100 minimum, but the industry also has a responsibility making sure that they are unique addresses, right? Because they're closest to the data to be able to do that. So I always view that as sort of a shared responsibility. Co-alert was an interesting concept. I love co-alert, and really what that is, hey, can you just simply, I don't need to know where Chris Lee moved to, but just tell me that he moved. He doesn't live there anymore. Or that he filed a change of address. And that would be a great way for a pre-mailing. Hope you'd mentioned before, a customer that says, I cannot fill out the PAP. It would be a wonderful way to be able to demonstrate before the mailing to the customer, I'll mail this, but I'm telling you, you said 20% on that one, 20% of this stuff's going to come back, man. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to have to bear the cost of that. So, let's agree that if this is what you want, then you're going to owe me additional money up front to cover that.
Correct.
So that would be a great concept. Would love to see that reconstituted in a discussion with MTAC User Group 5. And then just a couple of other things, geocoding. I mentioned those mobile delivery devices. I think the Post Service is aggregating a lot of very interesting data. Would love to see that provision to the industry as a way to do additional data quality, address quality information. We get street level geocoding, but a lot of times that's at the center of the property and not necessarily the mail receptacle where that mail moment occurs. And that's where I think a lot of marketers would like to have the latitude, longitude for geocoding. And then Cash Cycle O, I mentioned, is this going to be the last one? Oh no, I don't know. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that one. But I think right now there's enough in Cycle O to keep us all busy for quite some time. Now it's time to look at some of the questions, and I am going to come to that. But before we jump into it, I did want to very quickly mention Information Exchange. Hope this is where we met face-to-face the first time a number of years ago. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I'm excited about this year's. We're going to host this in Chicago, folks. So in the past, if you've attended, it was in Rochester, New York. A little difficult to get to Rochester. Should be easier to get to Chicago. We're going to host this in Chicago. We're expecting 100 people for this event. We're already at 50%. So they're filling up quick. So if you're interested in joining us and having a very candid conversation, not just about the software, this is not a sales pitch. This is really the primary purpose is to communicate amongst each other, very much like what Hope and I are doing today, just talking about concerns and challenges. Yes, we'll enhance the software and the technology to help solve those as we go forward. It's more about getting the voice of the customer and the voice of the industry. And I'm really excited that the OIG, the Office of the Inspector General, is going to be there. A great friend and advocate for the industry, Karen McCormick, Government Relations Manager, is going to be there. We're also looking at a feature keynote presentation as well from the OIG, and I'm working on trying to get some other people, so stay tuned for Information Exchange. But I do encourage you to take a look at it, and I would love to have you join us in Chicago, August 8th to the 11th. And again, it's about 50% capacity, so it's filling up quick, folks. And by the way, while you're also planning out your summer, don't forget the National Postal Forum in May. National Postal Forum is a great way to be able to get the latest in education, see technology on the exhibit hall, and build your communication and colleague database. Meet other people and start to build that network of friends and colleagues that can help you in your business personally and your career as well. So let's get to some questions here, and I'm going to look at my adjacent monitor here. So sorry for looking off camera, but I wanted to see what's kind of coming in here. I saw that we had some technical issues in the beginning, but hopefully Cody's got those worked out. The first one, and I kind of glanced at this earlier, medical facilities blinded by HIPAA and the concern that name and address is considered personal data or PPI, or I think that's what the phrase is. Our VP of operations at BCC, he's focused on all the data security part of that. But is there a way to get around some of these change of addresses or address cleansing with that? I'd mentioned a couple of them. Hope you had shared that you've got customers that say, hey, listen, I can't, I don't want you to change the address. This is where I've always been mailing this to. There are different ways to be able to get around that. I've seen many different strategies. I've seen people send out a postcard to the address as a separate mailing. Scan this QR code to indicate that this really is your new address, and then use that as a vehicle to be able to go back and get the authorization to update the change of address. I've talked about post mailing, the ACS solution, and then there's also something called legal restraint. This is a USPS recognized arrangement, I'll call that, where you can sort of set up a process that combines multiple mailings to be able to help satisfy to the Postal Service that you're complying with the move update requirement. But my biggest advice here, folks, is the conversation, and Hope, I know you're doing this, having the conversation with the customer and explaining this is really for your betterment, right? I'm trying to get the mail pieces delivered to the person that you want. And these are just tools in the tool bag. And is there any way that I can help demonstrate to you value on this in the chain of custody? What are you required by the courts on class action mailings to mail 100% on a 1 million piece mailing? You could have 50,000 with no address, yet we are required to mail them anyway. Seems kind of meaningless. I can't speak to court class action mailings. Certainly, I do have my trusted postal laws of the United States Postal Service handy all the time, of course, but I can't speak to any of that. I guess what I would say is that if you've got a customer that's saying, look, I got to mail, we have to mail this, whether that person's there or not, it's unfortunate. My advice on that is, again, the dialogue and communication. Hope you'd shared before, talking to a customer up front that, listen, these addresses are bad, right? You're going to have a problem. So be prepared for the return mail. And what percentage did you say of that mailing in the beginning there you had talked before?
It was 23%, little shy of 23%. 23%.
And my guess is you could probably see that up front. We're going to have a problem here. You're going to get a lot of stuff back, right?
Yeah, and I guess this one's going to be concerning for me because I believe they want to have those 50,000 returned for class action. I think they're going to be, that's why they enforce the mailing, because they want to say that they had that. So I guess that's a difficult, tricky one for sure, because that's part of what that lawsuit's looking for, is that non-response.
Another question about getting code 6000 errors on our mailer scorecard that deals with move update errors. Is that the result of potential problem with updating our postal data tables? Or is this an addressing issue with the data itself? So my response to that is, first and foremost, always make sure that you are updating the underlying data for the CAS certified software. So your software provider should be shipping you the software to update your software on a regular basis. In fact, monthly is typically the cadence that we see that shipped out. We have been talking about, is there an opportunity to increase that frequency? Maybe it's weekly, maybe it's every other week. So just a way to be able to do that. I'm a little sensitive on that because there is a real cost, both to the provider, the software provider, as well as the recipient for updating that data. But make sure that that's current. Make sure you've got a current subscription with your software provider to get the data. And then take a look go back and take a look at some of those return codes I mentioned before. Is there something in the data that you could see before that mailing went out that there was an issue with that with the address? Is there an issue with the change of address? And I didn't talk about it on the N2A link page, but if you don't have a ZIP+4, if you don't have a 9-digit barcode or a 9-digit zip, N2A link will not work. You have to have a ZIP+4 to even begin the N2A link process. So if I look at my address and all I've got is a 5-digit, I cannot find where Crystalline moved to. That will absolutely be a problem. And very likely is going to be UAA, and maybe as part of that 23% for that one customer that you talked about. So if it's just 5 digits, be careful on that one.
In addition to, there was a period of time where we were actually seeing that error, and for some reason our move update method was not flowing through when we were uploading our jobs to the post office. So I would also want to look into that too, because there was some sort of error. It was on our side. We could see it clearly as NCOA or return or electronic, whatever our endorsement was. But unfortunately, when it was doing the upload, it wasn't following through and it was saying nothing. I
Yep.
actually had a call yesterday with the post office that they said we sent a job, but there was nothing for the move update method. But I ended up being able to prove that it was actually there. So it's another, part of that conversation with the post office.
Okay, got it. All right. Well, I think that's all the questions that I saw in the chat here. I know that Cody, in our marketing department, director of marketing, he is going to make the link available. We're going to get these slides available for everybody. But I see we're at the top of the hour. Let me just begin to wrap this up then and thank Hope for attending today. Hope, you were awesome. You're a great customer and love the postal passion. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks again. I love interacting with you, Chris. It's always a hoot. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity and anytime.
All right, thank you. And thank you to all of you that attended today. Thank you to our customers for your business. Thank you for our partners that attended today. Thank you for your interest and concern about address quality. Let's all strive for that 3C approach in address quality and make sure everything is complete, correct, and current. And let's continue this dialogue. If you have a chance to join us at Information Exchange, do visit bccsoftware.com. You'll find the link on there. And don't forget, take a look at the National Postal Forum. We'd love to see you in Charlotte at NPF this year as well. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon. I hope to hear from you soon. Bye-bye.